So let's get started, everybody. Welcome to the second meeting in May for the Boundaries Committee. And we're going to start just really quickly by folks putting into the chat what is one of your favorite end of year or end of school year activities? And if you aren't doing them currently with a young person, you can choose one from your own childhood. But what is something that you enjoyed about the end of the school year? You can just put it right into the chat, and I can read them out as they come in. Graduation. Yes, going to all the graduations is so fun. End of year concerts. Yes, all the field trips. Got a preschooler that went to Bug Light today. That's awesome. Return of bike to school. Yes, the bike brigade for Ocean Ave is out in full force. It's beautiful to see. Anybody else have one they want to share? Art shows, yes. Hanging out with friends, yes. To me, it feels like both. It gets very busy and more spacious with more like light and fun activities. End of year beach picnic, oh, so good. So good. Well, I hope that whatever it is that you do at the end of the school year, you're getting to do that, or in the next couple of weeks, you find time to enjoy that, because there's so much joy happening across the district right now. Yes, all the backpacks and the lockers and the stuff that comes home and you're like, oh, this is what you did all year. Thanks for amplifying that, Kate. And we're going to get started, but first I wanted to introduce board member Maya Lena, who is going to be coming on to this committee for Yusra Ali, who had some conflicts come up, but we wanted to make sure that we kept the board voice here. So Maya will be joining us moving forward and helping with all the community outreach. And Yusra may still be involved at some point, but Maya will be here at the meetings and doing all the responsibilities for the committee from this point on. But so grateful to have Yusra here for so long. And I think with that, we can get started. Superintendent, am I forgetting anything before? You'll just, yeah. We have slides tonight as well as Miro, which I will share in the chat for folks.
So just to like voice over, got a pretty busy agenda tonight, as we always do here. Hoping to introduce a consensus tool, because there was a question about like, how do we make a final decision on where we're saying this street versus that street. So getting a consensus tool introduced. We're going to try to land at what I call a final draft of the elementary boundary, so that we have something for community engagement next week. Continue the work around middle school scenarios, and then do a little conversation around the community engagement next week, and share what I would say is like a skeleton agenda, and get feedback from the committee on what questions we want to make sure we are asking everybody. And you will see those dates and those times on a slide later on in the presentation. And so, Sarah, I'll pass it back to you around the consensus tool.
Beautiful. So I am proposing that we use a consensus tool that's called Fist to 5. Has anybody here ever used Fist to 5 before? You can raise your hand if that is the case. Let me see if I can get more faces here. Okay, so Fist looks like, okay, not very many folks. So that is totally fine. The good news is that it's a very easy tool, or easier tool to use. I think that really helps you move to consensus quickly, and also helps you understand where the group is at any moment. So the way that this works is when I will call for a vote, I will say it's time to do Fist to 5, and each person will choose kind of where they are in support of whatever we're voting on. So perhaps we are looking at a scenario tonight, and somebody says, I think that this is final, let's move it towards a vote. So if we move to a vote, I would say what that vote is, that we propose to accept this scenario to bring to the community, whatever the vote is. And then everybody chooses where they are. So Fist is no. I don't believe in this. There's no way I could support it. Hard pass. 1 is I'm just barely going along. I don't really like this. 2, I don't like this much, but I can maybe see a path. I'll go along. 3, I'm somewhere in the middle. I like some of it, but not all of it. But I feel like I can really see where we're going with this. 4 is this is fine. 5, I like this a lot. It's the best possible decision. I'm going to champion this. So when I ask for a vote, everybody will come on camera, and then we will put up our hands, and we will see where we are in consensus. And to get to consensus, Ryan, you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So once we all raise our hands, to get to consensus, everybody must be at a 3 or above. So let's do a little experiment. Ryan, could you take down the slide so we can all see our faces? Okay, beautiful. So here is the experiment. And if Lauren and Bill, if you could come on camera, we're just going to practice here for a second. And actually, Bill, you may not be able to come on camera. I totally get that. So we'll practice without Bill for this round. And the people that would be voting are not the superintendent or Dr. Warren or McKay, but it's committee members that will be voting on anything. But just for practice, we have here's the vote. The vote is that I think it's better when it's sunny outside. That is what we're going to vote on right now. So if you support that, then you're going to put a 5 up. You're going to find your, don't do it yet though. I'm going to tell you when to do it. So we all have to do it at the same time so we don't get biased by other people and tone setters and all that. So on the count of 3, you're going to put up whether or not you are in support of the statement that it's better when it's sunny outside. Everybody feeling clear on what we're doing here? Is there anybody that does not feel clear? Okay, beautiful. So on the count of 3, you can put up your hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay, can you put them right in front of the, okay, so we have somebody who is a 2. I don't know, Maya, if you really don't believe this or if you're just helping with the exercise, but we're going to see. So right now we have a lot of 5s, and we have Maya who is at a 2, which means that we're not at consensus. So everybody can put their hands down because I know what people did. And I will say to Maya, Maya, could you help us understand what would move you to a 3?
Sure. Oh, geez. I don't know what would move me to a 3, but I don't know that I'm fully on board with it because I think it is really important to have a variety of weather and to have rain for the plants and for, everything to be in balance. And so that's why I don't think it's always better for it to be sunny.
So is there a way that we could change the statement in front of us that would be able to get you to a 3?
Maybe it's always better for outdoor events for it to be sunny, maybe something like that, or it depends on what the context is.
Okay, so let's see if that can get us to. So it's always better for outdoor events when it's sunny. So here we're going to vote on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we just got to our first consensus, everyone. Good job. Okay, it's going to be much harder than that when we're looking at scenarios, but that is the practice that we're going to use to get us where we need to go. So with that, when we get to do a vote again, I'll remind you, we'll go back to the slide that shows what each level means. But that's the consensus tool that we will use. Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
What happens if we can't reach consensus?
So in all the years that I have done that and used this, that's not ever happened. I think if you really get into a stale place, it means that we need to change something, whether it's, something about the scenario or what we're voting on, but you just kind of adapt until you do get to a consensus. Okay. That's a great question. Thanks. Fingers crossed. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna give it back to Ryan because he just put something into his mouth. So that was sorry, poor timing.
That's all right. Piece of gum. So what we're trying to get to tonight, and we're going to look at elementary proposals 4 and 5 again. And McKay is going to talk us through a couple of pieces. We're going to try to land at a final draft. There were some topics that came up in the last meeting that I wanted to share out sort of what the current thinking is and just test it out and make sure it resonates with folks on the committee. So one is we need to limit some of the items that are up for discussion just to make sure that we can eventually land at a proposal so that we don't keep adding other potential variables in and so that we can get to a spot where we can do community engagement. And so there were 2 that came up. One was around class configuration. This was reviewed in the last committee, and it was determined that the savings weren't significant enough to justify multiple moves for elementary students. And the general feedback that we've had from community members so far is, well, there are some folks interested in this topic and this being a possibility. The general feedback has been a desire to maintain pre-K to 5 neighborhood schools. And so that's one piece. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to add, part of what the committee asked for in the last meeting was to just uncover like any documents that we could find from the last time there was a facilities and boundaries committee, which we were able to find some things. And all of those documents are also in our folder now. So if you want to review them yourself and go in a deep dive, you can do that. But this is kind of what the findings were there.
The second is the question around closing an elementary school. And the feedback that we've heard both from this committee generally and from the community overall is absent a pressing need, absent a true financial challenge, folks have wanted to maintain the 8 mainland elementary schools, to maintain the neighborhood elementary schools. And so I'm just going to name here that we do not have a pressing need right now, but we'll need to monitor enrollment trends, and we'll be able to see that later on in this process, but we'll need to monitor that over the next several years. So that's a current state that may change. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And so, Sarah, maybe we test out from a consensus piece, if people are comfortable for now, taking class configuration adjustments off the table and around taking closing an elementary school off the table so that we can then focus on the proposal 4 and 5.
Beautiful. So if you want to take the slide down, it's just easier to look at each other when we do this. So I think it makes sense to do those items individually. So the first thing that we'd be looking for consensus around is not considering class reconfiguration of the schools at the elementary or middle school level. So for Maya or folks that weren't here last time, there was conversation about what if we change things K through 5 to K through 2 or 3 through 5 or 6 through 9, like reconfiguring to try to get us closer to the goals that had been set by the resolution. Damon, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess in order to answer that, I guess it'd be good to know, is closing one of the middle schools still on the table? Because that is the only situation where I would possibly want to look into the grade reconfiguration further.
Yeah, so this statement is just making that statement about elementary schools. Because it does seem like kind of like from the last conversation and then also from what we've heard in the community, both currently and in the past 5 years, it does not seem like that there's an appetite for that in the community. And because we don't have the pressing need, we don't necessarily have to push on that lever.
Damon, can I jump in and perhaps propose a slight rewording of this? Mm-hmm. Which is, because this is what I think I'm hearing from Damon, because I've heard this in a couple of other places as well, is that if there is not on the table closing a middle school, then you're comfortable with this. If there's a proposal to perhaps close a middle school, that then you would want to look at grade configuration.
Yeah,
that
is accurate. Yeah, as far as I think at least looking at it, in which I'm not committing to saying one way or the other that I would support it. I just think that if we're going to make that change to the middle schools, then it should be something we look at. That's all. But if we're not considering that, then I am fully in agreement that we should not spend more time on it at this point. That's right.
So I think I am still a little bit unclear then on what the statement is that you're suggesting that we vote on. Could one of you clarify that?
Yeah, I'll happily do it. It's that class configuration will not be considered unless in this process or in a future conversation, there's a proposal to close a middle school. Or it's determined to close a middle school.
Damon, does that echo your sentiments?
I think that's a great statement, and we're happy to see if we have consensus around that.
Okay. And I'm just writing it down so I get it right. So the statement that's in front of us is class reconfiguration will not be considered unless there's a proposal to close a middle school. I said that right, correct? Okay, beautiful. So let's go. Can you put up the screen from 1 to 5 there, Ryan? Just so people remind themselves of the levels. Okay, so a fist is no, and then 5 is super in support of. So I'll let you just look at that for a couple more moments and think about where you want to be. Okay, Ryan, I'll ask you to take that down. Rob, what's your question?
I guess my question is, should we get consensus around this statement itself before we?
I think we'll see how this statement goes, and then we can tweak it depending on how close we are.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so one more time. Class reconfiguration will not be considered unless there is a proposal to close a middle school. So we're going to vote on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we have, Damon, is that 4 fingers? Okay, beautiful. So Priscilla and Rob, everybody can put their hand down. I would love to hear from you about what you feel like could be changed to that statement that would get you to a 3.
I can go first. I guess I would rather it not be conditioned on whether or not we are moving forward with considering middle school closure.
Priscilla, what would you say?
I agree. I think it's 2 separate subjects here. I think I'm still interested on the class configuration. In my opinion, it would affect a lot of the students' ability to, a lot of our families right now are in a lot of transitions because of housing. So I think it will affect a lot of our families, and you would actually avoid the movements that we are having right now between schools. So I don't think those 2 go together, in my opinion. I still don't see it. It may go, but I'm having a hard time connecting those 2 topics.
And Priscilla, to just say back what I heard from you, so you don't see the direct connection, but then it also sounds like you are still potentially wanting to consider reconfiguration because you feel like it would benefit McKinney-Vento students.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit more about how you see reconfiguration benefiting?
Yeah, right now, a lot of our families, not only McKinney-Vento students, but a lot of our low-income families move a lot because housing costs in Portland forces families to move from neighborhood to neighborhood, which forces them to move from one school to another. So I believe that if we have less schools, K through 2, or pre-K to 2, whatever it is, which is less schools, we will allow kids to move less, which will create less barriers for kids. It takes a long time for kids. We all know that those of us that are in education we all know how long it takes for kids to get used to the schools, get used to teachers, to staff. And then for kids to need to transfer every school year. We have kids literally transferring every year because they are moving from housing every single year. And they are not McKinney-Vento. So it's not a matter of only being McKinney-Vento. It's a matter of being low income and needing to move because they can't afford that housing, you know? So I think that class configuration will actually try to solve that issue.
Thank you. That is super helpful. And Ariel,
and I don't know about transportation, but I also think it would actually be helpful too.
Okay. I'm going to just remind us also of the priorities of this work that we're doing. So we're balancing utilization to balance socioeconomic, linguistic, and racial diversity, if possible, across schools, the maintaining neighborhood schools, considering the transportation impacts, and just minimizing the number of students impacted by boundary adjustments, especially siblings and neighbors. I think that's just helpful to have in our radar. Ariel, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that I don't know. The reason that I did a 4 was because there's part of me that thinks that if we're going through this whole process, we might, and I think this is something that someone said in a previous meeting, maybe Damon, that if we're going through this whole process and there's more radical change that maybe needs to be done, that we might as well do it now rather than kicking the can down the road. But I also think like my expectations for this process have maybe become a little more realistic over time. And I think it just seems like our choices right now are like get a slightly smaller project actually done, or if we keep trying to be ambitious about it, maybe not get anything done. And I also, I guess it would just like to kind of delve into the merits of what Priscilla is saying. And I have a lot of respect for Priscilla's experience. But I think it would take us a lot more time and effort that it doesn't feel like we have if we want to keep this process on track. But just one quick piece that comes to mind is I think what I heard you say, Priscilla, was more or less a lot of kids are already switching schools and that's really hard for them. And so, but like if the answer is let's make everyone switch schools more often, I don't know if that seems like the resolution. But again, it would require so much more actually looking at it to know whether it seems like a good idea or not.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone who had a 4? I don't think we had any 5s up, but is there anybody else who had 4 fingers up that would like to speak to why they voted that way?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Damon. And then Keith.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a matter of keeping us within the scope we have set for us. And I think if we're closing a middle school, then we really have to look at all the tools available to us to try to get at a balance of utilization and transportation and all the other goals. And I think that looking at grade reconfigurations, class configurations, gives us just another tool to try to find a better balance with, knowing full well it could be disruptive too. But if we're closing a middle school anyway, we're already looking at something that's going to be disruptive. So then I think it makes sense to add that. But if we're not closing a middle school, then it could add a lot more disruption to the equation that would not be worth the trade-offs. So that's why I think if we're not going to be looking at that, we should try to move ahead with something more modest that minimizes disruptions and tries to find a little bit better balance. So, and I also think one thing that might help too, if there's a concern on one side about a lot of transitions, it doesn't necessarily have to be a certain range of grades. There could be, say, if we were to look at that. It could be pre-K through 8, it could be pre-K through 6. I mean, trying to be open-minded here. That's really why I voted for the 4, where, and why I think it is important to say, okay, we'll look at it, but only under that circumstance where you're looking at potentially closing middle school.
Thank you, Damon. Kate, how about you?
Yeah, thank you for that, Damon. I'm just processing it. I think in my mind, if the recommendations we're making now are sort of done with the context that we are making recommendations for the circumstances as they exist in this moment. So unless this group is planning on recommending the closure of a middle school, I would leave that statement out. I think it causes anxiety. I think it can sort of water down the first part of the statement. So unless that's really on the table, because we could also add, if we decide to close a high school, or if we decide to add full-time pre-K everywhere. So there's a lot of potential context changes here that might affect this decision. But unless it's really in the present moment and something we're going to make a recommendation on, I think we either need to include all of them, or we just stick with we're not making any recommendations. So that's why I did a 4. If people feel strongly about that caveat, that's okay with me. But if it were up to me, I'd take it out.
And I can also speak to my 4, which is when I think about potentially reconfiguring schools, like that feels like a really, really big body of work on top of the really, really big body of work that is our strategic plan right now. And it feels to me like we'd have to start saying no to a lot of things to have the capacity to pull that off. And so for me, like, I feel like that is the thing that I can let go of in this process to make sure that we can continue the other work that's already moving forward in the district. So would anybody else like to speak about how they voted? So I would like to, again, read the statement and just see where we are, see if anybody has moved. And if not, then we can, I have an idea of how to change the statement. But the statement is class reconfiguration will not be considered unless there is a proposal to close a middle school. So on the count of 3, we'll vote. 1, 2, 3. All right. Good work, everyone. So we just got to our second consensus. Really appreciate to do that. It means that we're actively listening to each other and critically thinking about our own opinions. And this committee does that really well. So just thank you for that. So that's going to be a new kind of guiding principle in this. And so then the second statement that we needed to get consensus on is that we will not be considering closing an elementary school. So on the count of 3, we'll vote again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we are at consensus about that. That is our second guiding principle. All right. Ryan, back to you now. Ryan.
So we're actually gonna shift to McKay.
Oh, perfect.
And we're gonna look at finalizing a draft for between proposals 4 and 5. And so McKay is gonna walk us through that just as like a time check. We're about a quarter or third of the way into the meeting. So we're making some small changes, perhaps, to either one of these, but just want us to be conscious of the time. So McKay, turning it to you.
McKay, we can't hear you. At least I can't.
I think McKay's dealing with the technology piece because it looks like she's just switched to her phone. If that's the case, can I make a suggestion that, Sarah, we push on to the middle school, just update on the closure cost question piece that came up? And it may even get us to a consensus question there. Great. And then McKay, just interrupt when you're ready to go.
I think McKay is gone altogether.
All right. Everybody can go rogue on boundaries now and do whatever we want. So we're also going to look at, once McKay comes back, some middle school proposals.
I am back. I am so sorry. I lost my internet for 5 minutes.
No worries. Are you good to present yet?
I am, and I really apologize if I drop out again. Just proceed without me, and you have the documents in front of you. I'm really sorry. So, is it okay to go ahead and talk about? Okay. Excuse me. So I kind of wanted to look at both scenario 4 and 5 and the differences between those. This is for the elementary school, and talk you through the main differences there. I did lose connection to my virtual desktop, which I wanted to show you first, but we'll just go on with the actual PDFs. Does everyone see this? Can everyone see? Okay, great. And if this comes back online, then we'll switch over to that. But the PDFs give you the same exact information. I just wanted to be able to zoom in and out to some of these areas. So hopefully that will come back on in the next couple of minutes. But I did want to talk you through the main differences between scenario 4 and scenario 5. Scenario 4, essentially the two areas of difference are the areas. I'm going to kind of zoom in here. There are 3 study areas here directly below Highway 22 that were giving a boost to Ocean Avenue up to capacity of 70.3%. And I just want to remind you that this is residence based again. So we're just talking about residence students. We're not talking about enrollment, which have influence, policy has influence over. So scenario 4 moves these 3 study areas of students, which are fairly, they're higher in their density of population, to Ocean Ave from Reiki. That brings Reiki's utilization down a bit and brings Ocean Ave's up a bit. And then and it also gives a little bit better balance to the socioeconomic pieces that we'll go through in just a second. And then the other change that was considered was this area here that is currently LISA that would be moved or assigned to Presumpscot. And that gave a little bit of relief to LISETH, which is one of your higher utilization schools, and help boost Presumpscot's utilization a bit, getting most of the schools into the 70%, and then keeping East End, Reiki, and Talbot a little bit lower at in the 60s. So that is scenario 4. Scenario 5 rolled back those changes there. And I'm sorry, that would move. This would be a change area. Hold on, scenario. Yes. So you can kind of see if I scroll back and forth, you can see those 2 areas were rolled back. And so that area would stay at LISA in scenario 5. And so you can see they're not as equal on utilization. Lyseth would stay at high 70s. Presumpscot would stay at low 60s. And then these 3 blocks here, going back to Reiki, increases Reiki's percent utilization and decreases Ocean Av's utilization. And so those are the main changes between the two in a geographic sense. If we look at if we compare the scenario 4 and scenario 5 in utilization, you can see that there are some a bit of unequal utilizations here in scenario 5, where scenario 4 does a better job at utilization. Overall, it does move the needle quite a bit more on the economically disadvantaged students. It increases Ocean Avs by 15 percentage points and reduces Reiki's by 3% and reduces East End by 1.5%. Keep in mind that both Reiki, East End, and Talbot have very high percentages of economically disadvantaged students. And so if you want to keep utilization on the lower end, what that means is moving a larger number of students out of that attendance area to decrease their economically disadvantaged percentage points. So you're not going to move the needle a lot, and a slight change in percentage points does mean you're affecting quite a few students. So that's an important consideration to remember between these two scenarios. And then finally, when we're looking at how these scenarios impact the students, again, this is from a residence-based perspective. And so of the folks that would be affected, 66 students are currently assigned to Ocean Ave. In scenario 4, they would be reassigned to Longfellow. That's one of the largest impacts. There are 15 students that are currently assigned to Talbot that would be reassigned to Longfellow. That's in that Deering Triangle area. And then there are 28 students that are currently at East End that would be reassigned to Ocean Ave. 8 that are currently assigned to Presumpscot that would be reassigned to Ocean Ave, and 75 students that are currently assigned to Reiki would be reassigned to Ocean Ave in this scenario 4. And then 34 students are currently assigned to LISA. In this scenario, they would be reassigned to Presumpscot. And so this is the total of students for a total of 226 students that would be change their assignment, their resident assignment. And then in scenario 5, you can see it's a much less impact to resident students. You still have the same impact in Ocean Avenue, 66 reassigned to Longfellow, 15 from Talbot to Longfellow, but these are smaller. There would only be 20 students in Reiki, currently assigned to Reiki, that would be reassigned to Ocean Ave, 8 from Presumpscot and 28 from East End, and then only 4 from Lyseth would be reassigned to Presumpscot. And again, this is residence-based, so it's not considering any of the students that are transferring. So if there's students transferring out already, you wouldn't think of them as necessarily affected students, but these would be students that are living in this attendance area and would be reassigned to a new attendance area. And so that is an overview. I'm going to see if I can get back on so that we can zoom into any of these areas for further discussion. But that's the overall impact. You can see there's the largest impact are to these areas of Ocean Avenue, oh no. Did I lose?
You're still here, but McKay, as you're trying to work through that, maybe we can push this towards a question to the committee. And if I can just highlight something, and I'm not a voting member of this, but just one of the differences between 4 and 5 is around the size of Presumpscot. And so there is a need to be careful about making Presumpscot too small. And 5 probably makes it too small as it sits right at 200 students. And so that's just something to consider. And one thing I'll just appreciate, and it just like has worked out really well as this committee is engaged, is as we think about equity and we think about using socioeconomic as the measure there, I appreciate that we're getting to smaller schools, particularly serving more economically disadvantaged students. And so I appreciate that. Sarah, do you want to see if there are any questions between them and then move towards decision?
I think that makes sense. So Ariel, what are you thinking?
I think it's maybe a question about what Ryan just said about Presumpscot, because I happen to live in that little area that in scenario 4 would be moved from Lyseth to Presumpscot. And I'm like grappling with myself because like there's this whole like want what's best for the whole community. And also like, my kid is 4, so she's not in elementary school yet. But we have spent her whole childhood walking over to the playground at Lyseth and talking to her about how that's going to be the school she's going to go to and all of that stuff. And we could walk to Presumpscot, but it's very neighborhoody the way that we walk to Lyseth. It's not like crossing any big streets or anything like that, which I think we would have to do to walk to Presumpscot. So there's just a part of me that's like, oh, that feels a little like a loss, which I understand is actually the human cost of the decisions we're making here, whether my family is specifically implicated or not. But I think it would help me like feel a little more at peace with it if like I said, I just want to understand the piece a little bit that Ryan was just saying about Presumpscot. Like, is Presumpscot not really like okay the way it is currently? Like, would a change there really make a difference that is going to be appreciable? Because that is a worthwhile consideration.
Ryan, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I was just trying to pull up the numbers of what Presumpscot is now. So Presumpscot now is at 217 in terms of residents. And the number drops it in 5. It drops it to 213. I would contend that when we get to those size schools, this was the exact issue we were wrestling with Longfellow as well, is just about what's too small and what ends up with not enough staff, not enough teachers to do it. Presumpscot's great, right? So this is not a comment on Presumpscot as a school, but I would just worry about that versus getting to a little bit healthier number and helping out Lyseth on utilization as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. The like resource allocation that you're speaking to makes sense and seems like the best thing for everyone overall.
But I also think that like Ariel, you speaking about that is like what this is going to mean to people in the community. And so I just appreciate you modeling how you are thinking through this. And I just want to remind folks that we're going to get to a draft that we're taking to the community. It's not the final decision. We're still really far from a final decision on this, but we're hoping to get to a draft that we can bring to the community. Are there any other questions that folks have between scenario 4 and 5 at this point?
No, I don't have a question. I'm just a little concerned about scenario 5 because it doesn't change a lot the situation of Reiki. So that's just a concern that I have with scenario 5. Although scenario 4, it changes a lot. But I think I'm more leaning towards scenario 4 than 5 at this time because of that.
Yeah, I'm curious if others would echo that. Are there other folks that are feeling more strongly towards scenario 4, and potentially we could move to vote on scenario 4 being our final draft here? Yeah, Maya and Damon, do either of you want to speak on that, or are you just raising your hand to support?
I have an unrelated question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, since I'm new to this, I'm just wondering if someone can give a quick synopsis about why the area just south of Deering Highlands, the like Craigie, Bradley Street area, is not being considered as a relocation to Longfellow, and is staying at Row. Is it just because of like a numbers thing? Yeah, that area. And just in terms of like physical distance and commuting and that sort of thing.
And I can speak. Ryan, did you want to weigh in there? Or?
Go ahead.
I'll take a shot, and then the committee might be able to better, because we did look around some of those areas as well. But the biggest thought here in this reach down here and not here was driven primarily by economically disadvantaged and the differences there. And it was giving Longfellow, it wasn't helping out Longfellow. It was helping out Longfellow in a utilization way, but not in an economically disadvantaged way to lift those numbers.
Thank you. Damon, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be fine with either scenario 4 or 5. I'd say my one real concern with scenario 4 is really about the Persumska-Lysith transfer there, and especially about the walkability. But it's great that Ariel is here. It can speak to that. That's very fortunate. So I guess the way I feel about it is if she, and speaking for her neighbors, feels okay with it, then I'm okay with it. And as far as the other elements of that scenario 4, I'm okay with those too.
Okay. So I think I would like to bring a statement to the group that is to move scenario 4 forward as a final draft, and we'll just see where we are. Yeah, Ariel, go ahead.
Just a quick question. It doesn't, I don't know. There's like two different ways to look at it. Are we voting on scenario 4 in a vacuum, or scenario 4 versus scenario 5?
Yeah. So, so from what I have heard tonight, it seems like there is a leaning towards scenario 4. So I think it's worth like testing that and seeing if we can get a consensus around scenario 4. If that's the case, then we have consensus and we don't need to consider scenario 5. But also if there's another statement that feels better to vote on, support scenario 4 over scenario 5. Brian?
What about if the statement is that we're comfortable sharing scenario 4 as the one to the community for feedback, knowing that it's an iterative process, that we'll get feedback, that we may make adjustments, and that one of the things we've always talked about in this process is after we get to a draft, that we'll then layer on projections and any future buildings, et cetera, just like pressure test this to make sure it holds up. And so there's still space in which this may evolve. So the proposal would be not in a vacuum, but recognizing that we're having community engagement on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that this would be the scenario we would get community feedback on.
Yeah, let's vote on it and see where it goes. And we can always adjust if it doesn't land correctly, or correctly isn't the right word, but if it doesn't get us where we need to go. So if you could take down your screen, McKay, that would be great. So the statement in front of us is that we are going to bring scenario 4 to the community for feedback. So on the count of 3, we're going to vote fist of 5. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think we got there. Good job, everyone. So we will just see how that progresses as we bring it to the community. Yeah, Ariel, go ahead.
I am talking so much. I got a little freaked out when Damon was like, Ariel, speaking for her neighbors. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't talked to my neighbors. Not that that was like legally binding or anything, but because I don't have a kid in the school system, Ryan's email this morning was the first notice that I got of these listening sessions next week. So I'm a little bummed about the short lead time on that, because given that my neighborhood is going to be particularly interested in this, I would like to be able to like encourage people to go. We're not, none of the meetings are specifically like in our neighborhood. And so I just want to like say that is a bit of a bummer.
Yes, heard. I think we're doing a ton as a district right now, and being able to turn around all these community sessions is definitely stretching us. And, I think we have these sessions now, and then we'll also have sessions in the fall before we get to final recommendations for the board. So I get a little bit of trust in that. And, I'm hearing a lot from individual members of the community, and, meeting with folks as I can to also hear their individual feedback. Yeah, Maya, go ahead.
This is along the same lines, just in terms of communicating neighborhood assignments in general. I was talking to someone who has a similarly aged child to Ariel's, and they received incorrect information about what their districted school was, because they didn't know to look on the Portland Public Schools website. They were just looking on like Zillow from when they bought their house. And I don't know if we have any control over that, but they're districted for Row, but like it says that they're supposed to go to Ocean. So she was like, oh, I thought our school's Ocean. I don't know. It was just a weird thing. And I gave her the right information on the website and all of that, but that's just something also in terms of communicating. Yeah. People might not know where to get their information.
Yeah. And, I think that the district has actually in the last couple of years done a really good job of trying to tell people earlier before the school year starts, but that's something we can definitely pay attention to. I'm recognizing it's 5 minutes until 6, and we have not talked about middle schools yet. McKay and Damon, do the questions connected to your hands feel pressing?
Just quickly, the reason I was a 3 was because Ariel, sorry if I didn't want to put pressure on you, but didn't mean it that way. But yeah, I think we all are kind of speaking from our perspective and where we are geographically, and I do think it's very important to hear from the people who are affected by some of the changes we're proposing. And I appreciate Superintendent Scallon's statement that we're going to get input, and these aren't the final. And the statement was not reflecting a final recommendation. So just wanted to make sure that's totally clear to people listening, that is what's going forward, is a recommendation to get something out there for feedback from all of you.
Thank you, Damon. Okay, I think we're ready to move to middle schools.
Yes.
Great.
McKay, I'm going to do a slide before you do middle schools.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Just around the financial piece. And Sarah Warren, just because you're on this, can you make note that we make sure that the communication around the boundaries meetings also go to pre-K locations? I assume they already do, but let's just make sure that they go to all the early childhood. Great. So I hope you guys can see that slide again. No, it looks like it's paused. There you go. Now you can see it. So last time we started to look at middle schools, and one of the proposals was around whether or not to consider closing a school. We're going to look at scenarios today that include all 3 middle schools. And one of the questions that came out of the last meeting, so we want to make sure we're answering it, was around what are the considerations and what are the costs. And so this specifically looks at the cost from this. I talked with external experts who do this on a professional end and across the country, and that their usual finding is that closing an elementary school saves approximately $1 million a year. savings from closing a secondary school is in the $2 to $2.5 million range. The savings don't come from having fewer teachers or the thought that you're saving really on the instructional end, but come from other pieces. It comes from administrative and operational staffing. It comes from facilities and having fewer utilities, annual maintenance, cost of deferred maintenance, and transportation. And just transportation being streamlined as you're not going to 3 buildings. In this case, you're going to 2. There was also a question that came up around if there are issues where we would need to repurpose a building and potentially use it for other reasons. We're not trying to stack this up, so it's not adult ed versus a middle school, but just to put this in context for the committee, adult education right now pays over $200,000 for their lease, plus utilities and maintenance staff. And it's a building that they do an amazing job in, and it's not a great building for adult ed. Central office, there's been talk throughout the years, predating me, around moving central office or closing central office in the location at 353 Cumberland. It is about $200,000 in utilities and bond. And it was estimated in 2020 when they did a review that it would save $200,000. It's closer to $300,000, around that. And then early childhood is a cost that the district will be taking on by fiscal year 28. So 3 years from now, or 2 years and a little bit from now. And we will need to think about where we're providing those services for students that are 3 and 4 years old who will receive specialized services. So I share that so you have the context, right? That those are the savings, those are potential repurposing ideas, and where those savings come from. What we've heard from the community, and I heard a lot about it from the last boundary committee, is that if we're not in a current space where we need to close a building either because of space or because of a financial situation, and we're not in that right now, that there's a general preference to not close a middle school. That said, we need to maintain and monitor enrollment and potential fiscal pressures and the trade-offs that exist around size of school, right? So the bigger schools are able to offer more programs within a school. On the flip side, the smaller schools, in some cases, are able to offer better personalized attention and learning opportunities. And so just wanted to close the loop on that. I don't think there's a decision point here, as we're going to have McKay first share out 2 different scenarios around middle schools and then have a discussion. And so McKay, I'm going to pull down now.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start talking about the middle school scenarios. There are 2 that we've already had a chance to look at, 1 more recent, so I'll go through all 3. The thing I wanted to mention with my hand up is just another thing to stress to your community and those listening is that boundaries are one thing and we're in the first part of that. Implementation is a whole nother set of things. And so keeping that in mind that that folks are not looking at, there's nothing this fall, right? I know we're all just seeing the beginning of summer. So I just wanted to mention that implementation is a whole nother piece that comes even after boundaries. So something to keep in mind with community. Okay. I wanted to, can everyone see the screen? Okay. I just wanted to, I recognize that I didn't really go through stats where we are now first before we started looking at scenarios. So I'm just going to back up and just go through that really quick. So King is at currently, again, residence-based. The highest utilized of all 3 of the middle schools at 71.7%, and the highest on economically disadvantaged percentages of resident students. Lincoln and Moore are fairly tied at around 60%, with Lincoln being a slightly higher and economically disadvantaged, and Moore is the lowest at 46.4%. So that's just a backup to talk about stats. And then I'm going to switch over to this screen so that we can kind of zoom in and out of pieces. But this is scenario one. The priority here was on cleaning feeders. So you currently have some very strange splits in your elementary to middle. When we cleaned up the boundaries, we made them so that they matched your site of enrollment. We found that there were some of these slivers that I'm sure you've all been kind of dealing with in community at one point or another, probably some phone calls of confusion. What the main thing that you want to avoid in feeders is smaller communities that are being disconnected from their K-5 cohort into a whole new middle school with a whole bunch of new friends to meet, but that can be disconcerting when you're going with a very small group. And so this scenario one for middle school prioritize cleaner feeders from ES. We were looking at it is either scenario 4 or scenario 5 because those changes are not in any of the conversation here with elementary school. But essentially, you would have 2 splits instead of, I think you currently have 4 or 5, and then minimizing economically disadvantaged percentages between schools, and then utilization. And so this ends up, you can see all the changes here. The yellow line, the lighter yellow line are the boundaries for elementary school under scenario 4 or scenario 5. They're both kind of identified on here. But essentially the bigger change areas would be down here at the southern portion here. And then you'd have some change into this area would be going to King. They are currently going to Lincoln. And then these pieces were to kind of help out with feeder patterns. Deering Triangle would be going to Longfellow, which would feed half into Lincoln, half into King. And then Ocean Ave here would be a large change. They currently are set to go to Moore or assigned to Moore. They would all of Ocean Ave would be assigned to King. And then this area of East End, which is currently split, and some of those students already go to Moore, East End would completely go to Moore. So this would end up, and then there's a little change here, sending all of Talbot to Lincoln. So this would end up at 60.3% for Moore, 64% utilized at Lincoln, and 67.7% utilized at King. The economically disadvantaged percentages this would be the most even of the 3 scenarios that we're looking at today. 62% at King, 52% at Lincoln, and 54% at Moore. So it would reduce King by 4% utilization and decrease it by 8.8% in economically disadvantaged. This would cause potential impact to 223 students, with 29 currently assigned to Lincoln. They would go to King in the scenario. 55 at Moore would go to King. 30 at Moore would go to Lincoln. 20 at King would go to Lincoln, and 89 at King currently would be reassigned to Moore. So that is scenario 1. Scenario 2, and I'm going to kind of toggle these back and forth really quick so you can see that this is the least change of the 4 of the 3 scenarios. So you can see there's larger changes here and here in scenario 1, causing more drastic changes in numbers. And so this rolls back a lot of the change. A lot of the change is fairly minor in comparison, but you do have this change area for East End. These students would now attend Moore. you still have that Talbot, trying to keep Talbot a smaller community, keeping them together, going to Lincoln, and then Longfellow as well. They are currently assigned to Moore. They would be reassigned to Lincoln. And then a small offshoot here where you have a natural or artificial boundary would be reassigned from Lincoln to King. And so this would result in a fairly well utilized schools across the board. It does change the utilization the greatest at King. However, the economically disadvantaged percentage does not drop as much. So King would still be the highest, but it would reduce by 4.2% and be increased at Moore by 5.9%. Both Lincoln and Moore would see a modest increase in utilization as well. So this prioritized minimizing change at the existing boundaries. It does clean up the feeders to the extent possible. Using scenario 4 also applies to scenario 5. And it would affect the least number of students between all three. So 2 at Lincoln would go to King, 6 currently at Moore would go to King, 30 at Moore would go to Lincoln, 2 at Lincoln would go to Moore, and 74 at King would go to Moore. That would be the largest impact there. And then finally, this fourth scenario was developed looking at kind of the number of students at each of these schools, recognizing that they have different capacities at each of these schools, but looking at, keeping all of your middle schools at similar numbers also helps with programming and equality in getting similar programming between each of the classrooms. And so you can see I'm going to toggle this back and forth between the least change 2 and 4. And you can see a bigger portion here is changed from scenario 2 to scenario 4. So this tries to keep splits down as low as possible, trying to increase those numbers across all three schools. This results in a percentage of 65, 68, and 58 percent utilization. It brings all schools have over 400 students, and then this would reduce utilization percentage at King, increase it at Lincoln, and slightly decrease it at Moore. It would have not as much of an impact on economically disadvantaged, but it would decrease at King and across the board. And that's because you just have a different denominator, and that's how everything looks like it decreased. That's because you have just a different denominator in each of those schools. This one would also have a larger impact than that scenario 2 at 209. 43 currently assigned to Lincoln would go to King. 85 at Moore would go to Lincoln. 7 at King would go to Lincoln, and 74 at King would go to Moore. I know that was a lot, but I can answer questions, and we can kind of slide back and forth between these scenarios.
Yeah, let's start with Ariel, and then we'll go to Maya.
Thanks. This is not actually a question for McKay. That was super helpful. Thank you for running through all of that. It's more a question for the district, where at first when I was looking at scenario 4, I was like, why would we want Moore's utilization to even go down? Because all throughout this process, we've talked about how actually our middle school numbers are below the kind of standard benchmark for utilization, although we've also talked about how they feel more crowded than these numbers make them look. But maybe one benefit of scenario 4, I guess I'm curious, could it be that some of those other needs the district has that you were talking about, Ryan, could some space at Moore be used, maybe like for central office or something like that, if we were to go with a scenario 4?
So I think that is a possibility. That was not the sort of genesis or the seed for that idea. I think here it was, as we're sort of like starting the middle school process, is to think about whether utilization is the right piece at the middle school or if evening out the school sizes is the right thing. Next year, we're looking at more being around 500 students or a little over, and Lincoln being at 370. And so from a programmatic end that students experience, that's a pretty big difference in middle school. And so it was from that. And so it's really to sort of like put up 3 different ways of thinking about it and getting your feedback so we know which one to iterate off of.
Just to follow up on that, I appreciate that. I think I'm just like, when I look at these numbers, I'm sort of like, we have this asset that is more, if we're not worrying about, I'm not saying this right. It feels to me like a big disadvantage of scenario 4 to have so much capacity in more, like, what's the point of having this big building, if we're not going to do anything with it? So that to me would be a con to scenario 4, but I was curious if there's but I can understand the piece about trying to like have 3 equal size student populations, but we don't have 3 equal size schools in terms of functional capacity. So like, is there a way to turn that con into a pro, which could impact my interest in that scenario, I guess?
So, and I think there is. I was just speaking to like what was the driver of it. I think there's a possibility around that. We already have some of our higher need student populations at more in terms of specialized programming. So that's one piece where we already see that. I will tell you that when there was analysis done around looking at moving central office a number of years ago and having it relocate into schools, one of the locations that was identified that could potentially have sort of a separate area for part of the central office was more. And so it certainly, I think, is a possibility within that.
Maya, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, I have a comment and then a question. One comment is just looking at scenario 4 as the parent of Rowe Elementary School students. When I look at this map, I feel like it really, there may be going to be like 4 to 5 children from Rowe every year that go to Lincoln, and everyone else will go to King, just the way that the map is drawn. And that's just a guess. So that's just a comment. So I don't love that, because it's trying to aim not to split up kids, but then it's really splitting up a small portion. And then another just question I have about programmatically, King Middle School is EL Expeditionary Learning School, and Presumpscot is an Expeditionary Learning School, and there doesn't seem to be any tie between Presumpscot feeding into King. And also just in terms of like, evening things out for programmatic needs, the schools don't provide the same programming, is my understanding. And so I don't know that that's necessarily an argument. And I would be concerned about families maybe being upset if they're removed from the King district, if that's like something they're really excited about, just because there isn't another option. If they are assigned to King, they get to have that experience. And if they're not, then they don't. So I don't know if there's any discussion about programming in the middle schools.
Thanks, Maya. Damon, what are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I think Maya just asked a great question there, but I'm also thinking kind of in terms of disruption, which I think Maya mentioned, that it seems like scenario 4 adds a lot of disruption for not necessarily a lot of utility. So I'm not really seeing the rationale for scenario 4. I could see moving forward a discussion of scenario 1 and 2. I could see some real benefits to that. With, I guess, my first real impression after seeing it today is that scenario 2 is least disruptive and does provide some benefits, and scenario 1 is a little bit more ambitious and a little bit more disruptive. There may be reasons to consider it, though. So that's kind of my take here. I'd love to hear more input from others, though, and from the district as well. And if I'm not seeing something about scenario 4, then I'm certainly, I want to try to be open-minded about it. But yeah, I guess I lean towards scenario 1 or 2 again at this point.
And so at this point, I think what would be helpful is if we got to a place where we could give McKay a directive about one of these scenarios. About what we wanted to see next. Is there, and I'm going to see if we could maybe eliminate one of these scenarios. Is there anybody that feels strongly about iterating on scenario 4? That they would want to do some iterations on scenario 4? Okay, so I'm going to right now move that off the table. So thinking about scenario 1 and 2, is there anything that people would like to see iterations on either of these? Rob, go ahead.
Not really an iteration, but I think Deering Highlands naturally should probably go to Lincoln just because of where it's situated and because that whole population goes to Longfellow. With respect to the rest of it, I don't know if I have a strong opinion at this point, but I just think that should be assigned to Lincoln as opposed to King.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Lauren?
Yeah, Rob said what I was going to say. I think that is my neighborhood, but I also think it is it's a distance. It's truly a neighborhood school, that strip. But I also, the other thing I wanted to point out, regardless of wanting to keep Deering Highlands at Lincoln, is it seems interesting. I do kind of like that there's a decent physical boundary of Franklin Ave for that split from East End and King and Moore. So it's just a statement, I guess. It seems like, and then I do have questions, or I'm curious about exactly where the cutoff is between Ocean and King. But anyway, I think that's kind of where I would be leaning, is towards working on iterating scenario 2 and kind of looking at some of these closer boundaries. But
I'm going to bring that for a vote just to see if we could, get there, a consensus around bringing scenario 2 to be the one that we iterate around. So on the count of 3, if you support bringing scenario 2 to the next iteration, please vote. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, Damon, I can't see your fingers. What were your fingers? 4. Okay, and Maya, okay, everybody can put their hands down. Maya, can you tell us why you would like to block that?
I like scenario 1 better. I just think I like the idea of trying to keep as many students from their elementary schools together. But I know that this would make that area that, like, I don't know what it's called, the area by USM that's getting moved to Longfellow in elementary. Then they don't get to go to Lincoln with their peers. They go to King. So I don't know. I'm wondering if we can do 1 and 2 as options, or are we really just trying to do 1?
I think we're in the early stages of the middle school process. So I think and I'm also feeling like this middle school process is feeling faster, and I would entertain just taking some more time with these scenarios the next meeting. But also, I think if there's an ask that we could ask of McKay for the next meeting. So I've heard, making sure that Deering Highlands is at Lincoln, connected to Lincoln, seeing as if we can hold our feeders as much as possible all together. Were there any other things that came out? I'm sorry, I have children and creatures in the back that are slightly distracting right now. Anything else? Any other asks?
I think the other thing is, prioritizing certain streets, or like seemingly transportation boundaries, I guess.
The transport, so upholding potentially the Franklin strip that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think I wonder too still about certain. Yeah, it's tricky. I don't know. I haven't had time to really look, so I can't really speak to it. But I just want to. That would be my other thing, if McKay thinking about certain larger major streets. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, okay.
can I just clarify just really quick, just so that I'm understanding where these things are? Deering Highlands is this rectangular, it's north of this rectangle, is that correct? I just wanted to,
Yeah.
And Franklin, can you just remind me?
It's between the blue and the red. The straight line almost that's on the peninsula between blue and red.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think to what we think we've changed with the elementary is just going all the way to Deering Ave for Lincoln. I think makes sense from a neighborhood perspective, especially if we're going to change elementaries to be to kind of go from Ocean to some of that strip. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily all of it, but I think exploring some portion of that would be possible.
And just to clarify, so exploring, like essentially having a true feeder with Longfellow going to Lincoln. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think you have to have all of it, but I think like to like Brighton, like to where they converge, like Deering Ave and Brighton meet, makes like feels logically neighborhood wide sense.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Damon?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could riff on scenario 1 or 2 or iterate, I guess. But I think scenario 1 has some potential with maybe a few swaps like we talked about at Deering Highlands. I also wonder if Deering Highlands goes back to Lincoln, if maybe the Stroudwater neighborhood, which is the neighborhood to the southwest there where the cursor is, that maybe goes back to King. I don't know. I'd like to see what that does for the numbers. So I think that would help with the economic disadvantage number, probably, even if it would add a little bit to the utilization. It also keep the row kids who are in Stroudwater together, the row kids who are in Libbytown. So I guess that's a good thing. Keep more of the it would keep bigger cohort of the row community together there, speaking as someone who's part of that. I wonder if an iteration on scenario 1 showing that could be shown to the group. And as far as the otherwise, I like scenario 1 and it does keep a lot of the feeders together. Like the East End goes, to more, and also it keeps the utilization pretty steady. So, I like a lot of things about it. I'd love to hear more feedback, but I kind of think that with some trade-offs kind of gets at also what people are talking about with iterations on scenario 2 here.
Awesome. And just because we only have 5 minutes left, Maya, I'm going to ask you to hold your question for now. And so I think what makes sense is to, McKay, given it seems like 1 and 2 are the ones that people just want to see more iterations of, or could we take those plus the feedback that we've heard tonight and just see what you can come up with, that we could then like really get into the weeds, kind of like we did with the elementary school, where we really zoom in on the maps and think about transportation and roads and things like that.
I can work on a smush.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so that's what we'll do. Our next meeting is going to be July 24th to look at that. But then we just wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about the agenda for the community engagement sessions that are happening next week. So as a reminder, those sessions are Monday, June 2nd. Oh, great. Thanks, Ryan. That's going to be at Ocean Avenue Elementary School. We've got Tuesday, June 3rd at East End School, and Wednesday, June 4th online. And also last night we had a session that was specifically geared for multilingual families. And we did talk about boundaries there as well, because there were some questions there in addition to cell phone policy. So we did get a lot of engagement last night around that with multilingual families. Ryan, do you want to, and this agenda is what's being proposed, but we can tweak it. I will co-lead these sessions with district staff, and all of you are welcome to join as many as you can, because I think it is helpful to have people that live in the district be contributing as well. Grace, go ahead.
I just want to make a correction. There was a change in location for the June 3rd because King now has their concert. They moved their concert to that venue.
Okay.
So, it's going to be at East End.
Great. Thank you for catching that, Grace.
Grace, has that been messaged out yet?
I have it programmed for tomorrow morning at 7.
And it is on the website right now.
But it's on the website right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it's on the
must have happened between last night at 10 p.m. and now. So, great.
So that is, so we put it on social, the change. So just so you know we just changed that.
Thanks, Grace.
Got confirmation that we can use East End.
Beautiful.
And the just so you know, the boundaries page on the website will be up tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. So then our proposed agenda for these community sessions. Ryan, do you want to put your slide back up, please? Thank you. And it has been surprising with the cell phone and community engagements that we've done, how much we can really get out of an hour with folks. It does feel like we can really get a sense of the feedback in the room and questions that people are generally having. So I think welcoming and then sharing of the priorities and the process to date will be really important. And then getting a sense from people, do they want to confirm that we're maintaining neighborhood elementary schools and maintaining pre-K through 5, kind of like the consensus that we just built, I think we can bring to them and see how they respond. Then getting, some feedback about the elementary scenario that we came to consensus around tonight. And then going over and getting just feedback about questions for middle schools as we move into that phase of the process. And then I think it'll, just be important to let people know how the process will continue to move through the fall and then get to the board. Does anybody have any suggestions for changing, any additions or subtractions to that? Yeah, Damon, go ahead.
Actually, I think it looks great. I did have seems like no one has any edits to it. So a separate question is just a straw poll of maybe who's going to be there, just so we all kind of know and make sure that there's a decent number of people from this committee who can attend.
That would be great. And if people wanted to put that in the chat, and then I can capture it. So if you are able to come to any of the sessions, if you can put in the chat which sessions you can come to, that would be great. So Monday, June 2nd from 6 to 7 at Ocean, Tuesday, June 3rd at East End, or virtually from 6 to 7. Yeah, I totally get it, Ariel. Awesome. So we will, so that's good. It does look like that there will be some spread across the different sessions. I'll be at each of them. I don't know what Maya is able to make yet, and district staff will be there as well. One of the things that we've been able to do at the cell phone engagement is we just keep a rolling document of notes that someone takes, and then we can share that. We don't connect anything anybody says to their names, but we just capture themes and ideas that come up. And so that can be shared with the committee after these sessions. Yeah, Rob.
Will there be any discussion about implementation like the logistics of it and whether there's going to be grandfathering. I'm guessing that'll be a question that might come up.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Rob, I think that's such a good piece. I think we should put that in the process and name that we can get feedback on it, and that we'll do more engagement on that in the fall, because it feels like right now what we need to be clear on is there's nothing happening next year. And that one of the things the committee will wrestle with is how to implement and whether grandfathering exists or how it does and what it looks like. And so we should put that in the process piece and see if there's any feedback on it initial.
Yeah, I think we'll get there, because I definitely need a lot of community input on that, about how we implement whatever the recommendations are. Okay. Any other thoughts or feedback on the proposed sessions? Okay, then I'm excited to see some of you all next week. And just thank you for your great work tonight and critical thinking, and just you guys are really, really wonderful. So thank you for giving up another night. And for those of you that we don't see next week, we'll see you in July. So take good care, and we'll see you soon.